Protests in Atlanta, Georgia turned violent this weekend following the death of an environmental activist last week. Masked activists who were dressed in all black threw rocks and lit fireworks in front of the Atlanta Police Foundation, shattering windows along the way last night. They also lit a police cruiser on fire. The assailants were part of a group of protesters who were mourning the death of a non-binary activist named Tortuguita, who was killed after police say they shot a state trooper.
I know there will be much discussion in the aftermath of this decision as to what the so-called real reason was. I can tell you that what I'm sharing today is it. The only interesting angle that you will find is that after going on 6 years of some big challenges, I am human. Politicians are human. We give all that we can for as long as we can, and then it's time. And for me, it's time.
And when you stop and think about it, it's pretty extraordinary that we, select group of human beings, because of whatever touched us at some point in our lives, are able to sit in a room and come together and actually talk about saving the planet. I mean, it's so almost extraterrestrial to think about, quote, saving the planet. And if you said that to most people, they think you're just a crazy tree-hugging, lefty, liberal, do-gooder, whatever, and there's no relationship. But really, that's where we are.
We're still putting 162 million tons into it every single day, and the accumulated amount is now trapping as much extra heat as would be released by 600,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every single day on the Earth. That's what's boiling the oceans, creating these atmospheric rivers and the rain bombs, and sucking the moisture out of the land and creating the droughts and melting the ice and raising the sea level and causing these waves of climate refugees predicted to reach 1 billion in this century. Look at the xenophobia and political authoritarian trends that have come from just a few million refugees. What about 1 billion?
He said they're getting calls now from wealthy businessmen and companies to fly their executives around on business jets with unvaccinated crew. Now, they get the luxury of being able to choose because there are still a large amount of crew available in the United States who are not vaccinated because the companies they work for didn't mandate it. And
Yes.
these wealthy businessmen are requiring unvaccinated crew on their business jets. Now, passengers on an airline, bought a ticket, don't have that luxury.
The supply of Ukraine with air defense systems must outpace Russia's next missile attacks. The supplies of Western tanks must outpace another invasion of Russian tanks. The restoration of security and peace in Ukraine must outpace Russia's attacks on security and peace in other countries.
And I had quite a high level of confidence when it comes to Twitter. I have to say that we worked with knowledgeable people, with the lawyers, with the sociologists who understood that they have to behave.
After 3 full days on strike, this means more than 7,000 nurses between both hospitals will return to the job today. In fact, Montefiore says their nurses will be reunited with their patients starting at 7 a.m. this morning.
Welcome to Burn Babylon Burn. This is not a news show. It's an opinion show. We encourage you to do your own research. We do not give financial, legal, medical, or any kind of advice. Now enjoy the show.
Welcome to Burn Babylon Burn, number 38. I can't believe I have done 38 of these. But I've also done quite a few Doom Kitchens, and one of my guests in the Doom Kitchen was Phytophiliac here, and she has freshly released a brand new album, and let's start off by talking about that really, really quick. I can't hear you. You got to unmute.
Forgot to unmute. Thanks for having me here. So the album released on Sunday, the 22nd, and it is my 8th album. I can't believe I've done 8 albums. It's been a pretty wild ride as far as making albums go. I mean, I think I was doing one almost, it seemed like almost one a month for a while there. They were coming out pretty quick. But yeah, this one's a little different than the previous ones, and a lot different than the very first one I released. This one is, it's called Contumacy, and there are 7 tracks on this album, and they all have, I tried to present an image with each of the songs, so they all have their own theme, and the song titles kind of allude to the theme of those songs. So like the very first one is called Artifice, and it's like about the seeking out the things that are artificial in life and replacing them with something real. Because, you know, like Jep always likes to say, you know, they take away the real and they give us back the fake. Well, we should like turn the tables on that and take away the fake and return the real back into the world. And because the internet, life on the internet is not reality. It's, if you go out and you look around and you actually talk to people, the same sentiments that you hear online, they don't exist. And people in real life, real people, they have real things to say, and you'd be surprised at what you might find if you just start talking to people about stuff. So that's kind of what that one's about. But all of the songs have some kind of, you know, significant meaning to them.
Yeah, for sure. The online echo chambers. In fact, there was something about that in the clip montage. This woman from the UN was talking about sanctioning Twitter if they don't behave, and so and whenever you saw what was happening at the World Economic Forum, I always thought his name was Brian Stelter, but it's Stetler. And that's really weird because it's kind of like one of those things where you remember Kit Kat with the dash, or the Berenstain Bears or Berenstain Bears, all the other, you know, Mandela effects. I think I just entered a Mandela effect because I went back and listened to comedian Ryan Long's song about Brian Stelter. Stelter's his real name, and he sang Stelter, and this is driving me crazy. I don't know how this happened.
Is it always
because
yes.
it must have changed a couple of days ago. It's one of those things. Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So they're all about controlling narratives. They're they want you to be all for all the nonsense that they're doing. You know, they want you to eat the bugs. They want you to give all of your money to Zelensky. And regular people, I would say regular people I met a lot of truckers because I'm almost always at truck stops. Regular people are saying no to this stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, and none of us got a chance to vote on it. And so, you know, that's one of the things that I tell people. I said, you know, this is how I know that voting doesn't matter. Did you get to vote on whether or not to send money to Ukraine? Did you get a say about that? No, I sure didn't. I know you didn't. So that's how I know that they only give us, it's like, use the analogy of dealing with toddlers. If you've ever dealt with a toddler, I've done it 3 times. And in the morning, if you want to prevent a meltdown, you give them 2 choices of what clothes to wear, 2 choices of what to eat for breakfast. You don't give them the whole pantry to choose from. You say, okay, we're going to have oatmeal or we're going to have eggs. And, you know, that's your option. So they actually feel like they have control. And that's exactly how they've been treating us, is they've been treating us like children this entire time. And none of the decisions that they give us to make actually, or the main choices that we have to vote on, they don't matter because they've already got something planned and ready in the wings to, you know, they have every contingency planned for. So
exactly. Yeah.
You know, I don't even know why we participate. I would absolutely love it if we had another election and nobody showed up to go vote. I would love that.
I've wondered if that would work. I feel like they would just fabricate the votes. They would say that
And,
you know,
well, I mean, they do it
XYZ.
anyway.
Yeah.
They do it anyway.
Yeah,
So, I mean,
exactly.
at least you would at least see obvious evidence of it. And, you know, proof, it's your proof positive that that's actually what they do. They do whether people are voting or not. So, yeah, it's pretty frustrating. And you have all these people that just keep going along with it. It's like your compliance is what is making these things worse. We need mass non-compliance is what we need. Just
right. I can think of a
in.
few things right now that require that. You know, like the pistol brace ban, for instance. That, you know, if we just completely ignore the ATF, I mean, hopefully they won't raid our house and shoot our dogs. But
Right.
you know, you never know with guys like that.
No, you really don't. And even with the police officers these days, you know, my husband and I were talking about that the other day. We're talking about how, you know, had those, all those police officers. I can't remember where it was. They beat that man to death, or they beat him within an inch of his life. And then he ended up dying later at the hospital, and they fired all of the officers involved. They didn't even wait for an investigation. They fired them all. And I'm like, okay, well, you fired them. They're just going to go down the next town over and get a job over there. I said, you know, you can't just fire them and expect that to fix the problem. That's been the problem this whole time, is y'all aren't fixing the problem. And, you know, we were like, well, is this something that's always been happening, or we're just more aware of it? And, you know, it's like the whole thing with the body cams, you know, and the surveillance footage that, you know, the surveillance state is actually kind of a double-edged sword. It's revealing what the police are doing as well as what the citizens are doing. Everybody's actions are out in the open. And so I think with having the body cams, I think were probably one of the best things for the citizens, for the private citizen, was the implementation of those body cams. And because you're seeing so many, and it's gone on for so long. This bad behavior with police has gone on for so long. They don't even know that they're doing wrong. They don't even know half the time. They're like, oh, it's just the way we've always done things. That's scary.
Right.
Really, that's terrifying.
You're a Texan as well, and I'm sure that you've seen the footage of the guy in the taqueria that shoots the robber. Yeah. And people are having this moral panic over it, saying that he shot the robber too many times. But anytime somebody messes up in front of a cop, it's not one cop, it's 4 cops dumping an 18 to 20 round magazine into the guy that messed up. Yeah. So
there was a video that was just put out on Twitter not too long ago. I think it was within a couple of days, actually. It's the guy's, he had a surveillance camera in his trailer, and you see the police open the front door and throw in something, and it looks like it's moving around. So it's like a remote control little robot. You see it running around the house, pointing its camera, pointing its flashlight around, and it wakes the guy up, and he comes out into his living area, and you can hear on the camera, you can hear the cops outside yelling at him to come out with his hands up. He picks up the little robot, and he walks to the front door with it in his hand. He's kind of like limping, kind of hobbling a little bit. And he opens the front door, and he's like leaning against the door, and he's like, what's going on? And he sees all the cops, and you see him put his hands up, and you hear him say, put your hands up. He put his hands up. They just unload on him. His hands were in the air, and they just unloaded on him. And thank God he had a surveillance camera, because there's no telling how they would have spun that. He was reaching for a weapon, or we thought he had a weapon in his hand. And I think that's probably why they put that robot in the house to begin with, so that they thought maybe he would actually pick it up, and then they could say, oh, well, we thought he had a weapon in his hand. You know, it's just really crazy how they're able to get away with the things that they get away with. You know, anybody else does it, and we go to prison, or we get the electric chair, or we get, you know, lethal injection for treating people that way. But the cops get to do it with impunity. And it's all because of that qualified immunity that they have, that protection. But I think, I'm hoping that with continued video evidence of these egregious breaches of public trust, I'm hoping that something changes, but I'm not going to hold my breath. So yeah,
we see the foot soldiers that are enforcing all this, and you know, it's whenever you see these new rules, new laws, or whatever that we're talking about mass non-compliance for. Well, we've seen hundreds of those happen before, and we don't, you know, we're not getting that. First of all, we're not getting the non-compliance from the people. I mean, people were ready to turn people in for not taking a shot recently, and so we're not standing together as regular people, and we're getting run by horse-faced Jacinda, or you know, or crazy, you know, boiling ocean Al Gore, or you know, extraterrestrial John Kerry. All this stuff, these people are pushing these dictates down on us, and our guys, you know, our regular guys, our cops, our firefighters, everything like that, are still going along with this. And as soon as we stand up and say, hey, you're powerless without us, we're still going to get more of this. We're going to just keep getting more.
Yep. And I think that's a lot of the reason why, you know, I really believe that if everybody would just say, stop paying their taxes. If we all stopped paying our taxes, you know, somebody's going to have to go to jail. Someone's going to have to take a hit. Somebody's going to have to take a fall. But they can't, well, and I was like, they can't put all of us in prison. But, I mean, really and if I could ever find a way around like the whole property tax thing, I mean, that's the one that really worries me, is because if I stop paying my property taxes, they actually can come in and kick me off my property. And even if I've paid for it, you know, even if it's paid in full, it's not currently, but at some point in the future, if it were, and for people that do have their property paid off and they're still having to pay property taxes, if they don't pay those taxes after a certain period of time, they'll come in and kick you off the land. And it doesn't matter if you own that property or not. And so, you know, as far as non-compliance goes, it's certain areas where we have to focus the non-compliance. Like it's not going to be in all areas. So like property taxes, but like when they say, oh no, you can't shop at this store unless you have a immunity passport or a vaccine passport or a vaccine pass or a QR code or whatever. We just don't shop at that store. Just don't go there, because they can't afford to stay open if nobody shops there. And it doesn't matter if you've gotten the COVID shots. It doesn't matter if you're up to date on your boosters. Stand in solidarity with the people that have the right to choose whether they want to take this or not, and choose to go somewhere else. And if we'd support our local farmers, you know, especially in like these rural areas, you know, I get my eggs from a coworker who has chickens, and you know, I got 36 eggs for $8 the other day, and you can't get that at the store.
You're rich.
I've got gold nuggets sitting in my refrigerator. They're not on the refrigerator; they're on the table. You don't put yard eggs in the refrigerator. But no, she is not looking to make a profit off of these eggs, and she's not going to at that price. She's not. She's actually going to lose money doing it that way. But she's in a position where she has that luxury to charge that amount of money for those eggs. And they're not, a lot of people are trying to just break even. And so they're going to charge a little more. But I mean, I've even got a guy that's got, he's fixing to take a steer out to the butcher and at the end of February, and he's looking for people to buy meat, and it's $5.50 a pound. And I was like, I wish more people lived closer so that I could tell them about this. And, you know, we could all go in together and get, you know, this meat. And I've been talking to all my coworkers, trying to get them on board with getting some meat, and they're all about it. But, you know, it's like a few pounds here, a few pounds there. It's like, no, I'm going to be getting 35 pounds of ground meat. I'm going to shove it into my freezer and use that. And that being said, you know, there are plenty of people that have things like grass-fed beef and chickens and other animals that you can eat for protein if you just look for them, especially in the rural areas. Now, in the big cities, if you live in a big city, get out as soon as you can. That's all I can say. Just get out, because that's where it's all going to go down. When they start bringing in the digital ID and they start bringing in the CBDC, it's going to hit those areas first. And the rural areas might actually get away with not having to have that, but it's definitely going to be a requirement for living in the big cities like Austin and Houston and New York and all those big towns like that. But we can work with our communities, like out here, I can get with my neighbors and we can, go in together on a cow or a steer or whatever. And it makes it easier for everybody. It's cheaper than the store. I mean, $5.50 a pound for grass-fed ground meat. You can't get that price at the store anywhere. I think even here in Texas, where, Texas is the cattleman's capital of the world, we, our ground meat is actually cheaper than our beef is cheaper than most places in the country, and we're still paying a lot. And so it's like, I think I actually went and bought a pound at the store the other day, and it was like $6.50, I think, $6.70 for a pound of grass-fed ground beef. And so if you can get it from a local farmer or cattleman, it's going to be a hell of a lot cheaper.
Yeah, I was thinking that I was listening to No Agenda probably about a week ago, and they were talking about the egg situation, and somebody sent them a message that said that the supermarkets are not paying the farmers extra, so the farmers are not incentivized to produce more, and so it's going up in the supermarket. They're pocketing it, but the farmers are not getting extra, and this is part of the equation, also considering the fake bird flu that they had last year. But that's part of the equation. Now, if that farmer and I knew each other, I could be, rolling in the money like you, with your 36 eggs. But, see, that's the thing is you got to foster these relationships, or whenever the SH is the F, when that happens, we're pretty well doomed. So keep that in mind, y'all.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't even have to pay them in money. Sometimes you can, like, for those eggs, I'm actually not going to be. She said she was going to charge me $8 for the 36 eggs, and I was like, okay, I can either give you cash or I can buy you lunch. And she's like, oh, you can buy me lunch one day. I'm like, all right, so I'll buy you lunch one day. So buy her lunch one day, and I got 36 eggs. So. But I don't know if you and I had talked about this before, but it was a couple of years ago. I think it was 21? Pretty sure it was in 21. The doctor that I worked for, he actually had taken like a 2-week vacation, and because of all the COVID stuff that was happening, and he went up north to a place up in Montana, I think. And he spent 2 weeks up there just doing hunting, fishing, all that kind of stuff, just to get away, just to, change of pace, because he was really stressed out. And he got to talking to the guy that he was running the house that he was staying at. He was talking to the guy, he's a cattle rancher up there in Montana. And he said that the cattle rancher had several hundred head of cattle that he was getting ready to take to the processing place for butcher. And he said that when he got his cattle up there to the processing place, they told him they were no longer honoring the contract that he had with them, and that he had to take his steer elsewhere. And he's like, where else am I going to take them? You're the only place that I've been doing business. He's been doing business with them for a long time. They said, we are not taking your steer. And it wasn't that they couldn't, it's that they chose not to. And that was right around the time. It was right after that, or right around that time, that there was a bit of a beef shortage. Beef shortage in the across the country. There was, and beef prices were starting to go up. And so it wasn't that there wasn't enough cattle to butcher to send to the store. They weren't, but it was like they were paying farmers not to farm. They were paying cattlemen not to butcher their cattle. And so a lot of this food shortage is completely and utterly manipulated, and it's artificially generated. It's not a real shortage. There's not a real shortage of food. They're making it this way, and they're doing it that way on purpose. Like when they were when all those food distributor places were going up in flames, just for corn cribs just naturally going up in flames, just because that's what they do. No, that's not what they do. They can, but they don't do it regularly. And so
Right.
it's a lot of this fear that has been perpetrated in the media through the food shortage. It's artificially generated. It's not a
It's
real.
self-perpetuating.
And it
So
is. It really is.
So you start to tell people to panic. They panic buy, and that causes more shortages.
Yep.
And yeah, and then if you start to involve price fixing, which we're probably about to see with fuel, one of my driver friends says that he's noticing more and more truck stops that are out of fuel. And I haven't noticed it yet, but he goes to a lot more smaller truck stops than I do. I'm usually going to the big chains because the company that I work with has a relationship with a big chain. But he goes to smaller ones because he's an owner op. And he's saying that he's seeing a lot more yellow tape around the pumps. Now, I know that they're trying to keep fuel prices low because they know that they're gone once that because a lot of people were mad. Obviously, they had good reason to be because fuel went way up in a very short period of time. And now that they're like, oh, okay, cool, it's like $5. We're gonna knock it back down to $3.90, and it's like, well, it started at $3. So that's their scam. But yeah, right. And anyway, he's saying that he's seeing this more, and that could come from price fixing. Price fixing is the reason that shortages cause whenever there's a shortage, and then they do price fixing, then you get things to run out because supply can't meet demand. Pricing tells you what demand is, and then there's the whole incentive to produce. If there's no incentive to produce, then why produce? And then you've got crazy government people that are sticking guns to people and telling them that they have to produce, and that's even crazier. But here we are. We might see a lot of turmoil this year. It's either going to be smooth or not smooth. Last year went a lot smoother than I thought it was, but
as far as like producing your own food and growing your own food, I was telling my coworker with the chickens, I said, and my husband and I had talked about the chickens again because we had chickens last year and either they all died or got out and died, or my dog killed them, and it was last year was a flop, total flop. And so we were talking about getting chickens again this year, and I said, with the way egg prices are and everybody's panicking about the eggs, I said, I guarantee you the Tractor Supply that sells the chickens at the store here in town, I guarantee you they're going to sell out this year. They're going to order a whole bunch and then they're going to sell out because everybody's going to be like, oh, remember the egg shortage? We need to get more chickens. And so I guarantee but one of the good things about chickens, though, is if you order them online, you can still get them shipped to your house. So it doesn't matter if it's springtime, if it's wintertime. They generally don't do it in the winter, but like in the spring and summer, you can order them online if you can't get them locally. There's an entire process to go along with that, but because I had looked at doing that because I wanted a specific breed. I wanted to get some broiler chickens and try to do them for the meat. But I think this year we're going to try to focus on a garden, and we have a pretty good sized backyard, so we could do a pretty good sized garden. We did a small one last year, and it didn't yield as much as we had wanted. I didn't fertilize properly. That was my big issue. But that's probably what we're going to be working on. And I think that's something everybody can do. And if you can produce your own, get your own produce growing, we did pretty good with green beans, actually. Green beans are pretty easy to grow. And if you fertilize properly, you get tons of green beans off of just one row of plants. So that's probably what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be encouraging everybody to do that. Just grow a garden. It's really not, it's a little bit of a learning curve, but if you're willing to put in the work and study up on it and figure out how to do it, it's not hard, and you'll actually get some vegetables out of it, and you're not having to, uh-oh, did I lose you? Did you lose me? You went away. So, but yeah, but yeah, we're gonna be doing garden. We might even try chickens. I'm not sure. He wants to try chickens, but definitely doing things around your own property if you have it, and even if you live in an apartment, you can do a balcony garden. And there's plenty of resources online you can find. You know, I'm a big proponent of educating yourself. There's, you know, I tell people all the time, in the age of information, ignorance is a choice. We have plenty of places you can go to educate yourself. There's plenty of online sources and even libraries. Everything okay? I think I lost you again. Can you
Yeah,
hear
I
me?
messed
Okay?
up my headset whenever I accidentally pressed the back button. I'm gonna find a thing, just talk about stuff for a little bit, keep the audience enthralled, and I'll be right back. I just gotta find this plugin.
You're really testing me, my limits. Okay, so I guess, I mean, there's only so much I can say about like gardening and chickens and stuff. I mean, you really just.
Oh, okay.
Definitely.
Well, I'm here. I got it working again. Sorry about that.
Chickens,
Yeah.
everybody, chickens.
Well, I was hitting the mute button and I fat fingered it and pressed the back button because it's right there on my phone, and that cut off my Bluetooth for some reason. Anyway, so moving on, because we've just kind of felt around on the news topics, but we haven't really gotten into them. What are your takeaways from Davos 2023?
Well, I did kind of follow. I did watch some of the coverage that people were posting. James Melville did a pretty good little, I think it was 20-minute, maybe 30-minute coverage of the first couple of days, where he talked about the different things that they were presenting, and it really, they didn't really cover anything surprising. They pretty much covered all the same things that they've always covered. Maybe a slightly different tone. I did catch a couple of interesting tidbits when they were talking. Klaus Schwab was talking about, I think it was Klaus Schwab. It might have been that French guy. I forget what his name is. They were no, he wasn't French. He had an accent. But anyway, they were talking about, said that they need to identify the people in like leadership who aren't performing up to standard, and maybe change leadership. He was calling for change of leadership at the World Bank. And I said, oh, it sounds like some people are going to get thrown under the bus. And then it wasn't like 2 days later, Jacinda Ardern starts talking about resigning. And I said, okay, well, maybe that was one of them. But I'm absolutely convinced that she didn't resign of her own accord. She was definitely told to do that. And of course, the guy that they've pegged to replace her is not any better. He's actually probably one step worse than her. So
lovely.
New Zealand is actually, I think, in for a really hard time. I think in the next year, 2 years, I think they're really going to start cracking down on New Zealand. I don't know why they decide New Zealand of all places. Maybe because the people there are genuine and they're good-hearted people, and they just want to, I don't know, teach them a lesson. I don't know. I really couldn't tell you. But
it's great land. I lived there for a year.
Yeah.
It's amazing land, and I think that they want it. I think that the
I think they're
Overlords
going pretty hardcore after New Zealand right now.
Yeah.
And it's just really weird. I mean, of all the land masses out there, you're going to go after an island. So
well, it's
definitely something to
remote,
watch.
and yeah, so
yeah,
the super rich people can just, you know, the population, at least when I lived there, because it's way more than it was then, was less than 2 million when I lived there, and and almost all of them were on the North Island. The South Island, which is breathtaking, barely had any people, and it was great. But yeah, I think the whole agenda with making it a tyrannical place or an unpleasant place to live might be to just push people out. But Jacinda, I think, is going to get a promotion. She might not get
that would surprise me. Yeah, it wouldn't
might
surprise
not be
me
power,
if
but
she turns up somewhere else. It wouldn't surprise me at all. But I know that she didn't choose her resignation. And then let's see what else. Of course, I think everybody has now pretty much maybe everybody. I don't know. A lot of people have seen the video of Klaus Schwab pretty much snubbing that independent journalist from Japan. And what's funny is, this was the first time I actually noticed it, and I got to thinking about it, and then I've seen in other videos of the goings on at Davos, it's the same thing. When he snubbed her and basically ran for the car, he ran for a gas-powered vehicle. He didn't run for an electric vehicle, and so they don't have any electric power. They don't have electric powered vehicles up there. And one of the interesting things about electric powered vehicles in cold weather is that it drains the battery like almost immediately. I mean, you have almost nothing in your battery after just a few minutes. And that's something that they don't really talk about when, because I think there was, I'm trying to remember who it was. They said that when they had the blizzard up north a few weeks back in December, I think, there was some people traveling in a Tesla, and they were trying to get from one place to another, but they were going they were in the north, so they were driving, east to west, west to east. They're driving horizontally. They weren't going to the warmer place. They were going from one cold place to another cold place, and they were just barely making it from charging station to charging station. They couldn't turn their heater on because that, of course, drains the battery. And then the cold weather drains the battery, or doesn't make it work very efficiently. And then, of course, you have the Teslas that were stopping because they ran out of juice in the middle of the interstate, and then caused like an 8-car pileup because you're driving down the interstate and you don't expect to see a stalled vehicle in the middle of the road and cause an 8-car pileup. And so, yeah, they want to push the electric vehicle thing, and they're not really talking about the drawbacks. They're like, oh, it's all good. It's all good. All good news coming out of the electric vehicles. There's nothing bad about electric vehicles. And if you say there is, you're crazy. But there is tons of bad things about electric vehicles. They were
catching fire too.
Yeah. I think there was a bus, an electric vehicle bus that caught fire. I think was it in Spain, or was it? I can't remember where it was, but the thing was on fire, and it's like that thing's not going out for a while, and it was just rolling through traffic. It was just one big inferno going down the street, and these vehicles, they haven't developed them to the most efficient and least cost effective, or most cost effective iteration of them. They still require a lot of the trace elements like the lithium and the cadmium and all that other stuff, those rare minerals that we only have a finite amount of, but apparently everybody on the planet's going to have an electric vehicle or access to one. And when you start kind of scratching the surface of the whole electric vehicle agenda, it really starts falling apart pretty quickly. And anybody with 2 brain cells to rub together can, you start seeing the cracks pretty easily. So that's they're definitely pushing that for sure. There was some talk about transhumanism, not a lot. I think there was more talk of transhumanism in previous meetings. I think they didn't really talk about it too much here this last week, but they did mention it. Then, of course, there's the fear mongering. Al Gore was the poster child for that this year. I just want to reach through my computer and just slap the crap out of him. It's like, dude, get a grip, okay? Get a grip. You're starting to sound like Alex Jones.
My favorite bit of that was when he was talking about the climate refugees, and I'm just like, oh wow, okay. So
where did you get that number from? Okay, that's what I want to know. Where did that number come from? I want to see the math that you conjured up to get that number. I want to see it. I'd love to see it.
As if the part of the agenda is not to flood all these countries, all the first world countries, with third worlders. I mean, they're already doing it, and it's like, okay, well, Al Gore is sitting here saying that, well, it's going to keep happening. Of course, that's what that's what they want. Yeah, that was fun. My favorite of all the reporters following people was the one where they were following Borla. I should have got that clip for the intro.
Oh,
but
yeah, that was a good one. I did see that one. That was good.
Well done, Rebel News.
It really surprised me that he was laser focused. He was like, I am not even giving these guys an inch. Didn't say a word. I was like, I don't know how that guy's got nerves of steel. That's all I got to say. I mean, just how do you not react to some of those questions that they were asking?
Well, he's a sociopath. He murdered millions.
He's got to have no empathy, to have no emotion. I mean, just it's water off a duck's back. It's just a fly buzzing around my head. It's not a big deal. The guy's got to be a psychopath. He's got to be to not even have even just a smidgen of an answer. He was not wanting to answer any of them questions. I could tell. And Schwab too, even him, he was like, no. But I was surprised that he turned around and Schwab asked that journalist who she was with. I wonder if she shouldn't have just lied to him and said she was with MSNBC or, CNN or something, just to see what he would say to her. But I think that would be against journalistic integrity.
It might be worth it to see what happens to that news organization.
Happens, I mean, they lie to us all the time. I mean, a turnabout's fair play, I think.
Right. Well, their servers could go down in the next few weeks, or they get debanked, or something like that. Because I mean, he might not be able to directly speak to her boss, but he could make the other wheels turn the way that they do. And I mean, we've seen that already. We saw Parler's servers get shut down because they were owned by Amazon, and we saw Kanye get debanked recently, and tons of people are getting debanked. In fact, I just saw a thing about Wells Fargo debanking gun shops. So that's pretty bad. And apparently that's happened more than just Wells Fargo, but that's the one that I saw recently.
Oh, and speaking of demonetizing people, that whole thing with with PayPal's terms of service, their that little blurb that they inserted into their. Do you know they still have yet to cancel or to deactivate my PayPal account?
Wow. Yeah, I was going to ask you. I was just about to say
October 6th. Okay, they still have yet to deactivate my account. It's still open.
Start from the beginning. Okay, so Fido has had this saga with PayPal. Tell the story.
Yeah, I ended up having to shoot myself in my own foot because of it all. But so when the whole thing came out with PayPal and their terms of service, and how in their terms of service, and I did actually see the verbiage in there, said basically, if you say anything that we don't like, we reserve the right to cancel your account, to deactivate your account. And so, at first I was like, oh, there's no way. And then I saw people posting screenshots of the verbiage in the terms of service policy. I was like, well, I could probably look that up myself. And so I went to the terms of service policy and I looked it up. Sure enough, it was there. And it's funny because when I got to looking at it, this was already after they started backtracking. Like, oh no, we updated it, we fixed it. That wasn't supposed to be in there. And I went in there and looked. It was still in there. It was an update from like 2021. They had updated that back in 2021 to be that way. So it had been like that for like a year. And then somebody found it, and because they actually started paying attention. And so I was like, well, I know that I'm pretty active on Twitter saying stuff that isn't exactly popular. I think I'm going to go ahead and just, nip this in the bud and not let this be an issue for me. I'm going to go ahead and remove myself from PayPal. So I started doing that. And I was actually going to leave my PayPal account for Bandcamp up. I was going to leave it up just in case, but I was going to close my personal account. And so I started through the process to close my personal account, and they wouldn't let me. They said there's something preventing the closure. So I was like, okay, this is kind of weird. I don't know why, but I have no money in there. I don't owe anybody any money. So there's no pending transactions that would prevent me. And they said, look in your subscriptions, because sometimes if you buy something, it sets up an automatic subscription or an automatic pay. And so you have to clear all of those out. And so I went and I looked in mine. I had like 3 of them. They weren't like recurring subscriptions, but they were like to make the transactions faster. So like if you went back to that site to buy something, it was already there. You didn't really have to re-enter any information. You just click of a button and go. So I deleted all of those. And then I tried to deactivate the account. And they said, no, you have to talk to customer service. And I did a couple of videos, and I have a third video. I think I have a second video that's much longer, where I actually played the audio of my conversation with customer service at PayPal. And the guy's telling me, he said, if you have an account with like some of these other Cash App programs, partners like Cash App, Venmo, Zoom, and I thought he meant Zoom, the video chat service. I didn't know there was a payment service called Zoom, XOOM. That's what he was talking about.
I didn't even know that.
So I had used Zoom, ZOOM, the video chat service. I'd used that. And I told him, yeah, I've used Zoom before, but we were talking about 2 completely different things, but I didn't realize that at the time. And I said, yeah, I've used Zoom before, but I've never used it for monetary transactions. He said, oh, well, that's what's keeping you from closing your account. And I said, that doesn't sound right. I mean, even though we were talking about 2 completely different things, it still didn't sound. I was like, there's no way. I've never entered any kind of money transaction, whatever, with the video chat service. I was like, there's no reason why that would even register with my PayPal account. It's not and I think it did actually have the same email address, but still, I mean, it had nothing to do with that. So I went and I called, and then I realized that he was talking about the payment service, the payout service, XOOM. And so I called them and I verified. I called them to make sure that I didn't have any kind of account with them, any kind of maybe a shadow account or anything with them. And that was one of the things that PayPal told me. They said, you have a shadow account linked to your PayPal account. And I'm like, a shadow account? Shadow account? I was like, that sounds like really fishy. And so then they backtracked and like, oh, well, it's not a shadow account. It's this, it's blah. They give me the runaround, like royal runaround. It's crazy. And so I verified with XOOM that I did not have an account with them. And I recorded that conversation. And then I called PayPal back and I told them, look, they don't have my bank account information. Please close my account. Oh, well, we're working on it and we've escalated it to our, the highest level of customer service, and they're working on it. I can promise you. I was like, what proof do I have that you're working on it? I mean, you're just telling me. I mean, it's like, how do I know that that you're working on it? And of course, he couldn't answer that question. And so I got off the phone with him, and then I checked it I haven't checked it today, but I checked it like a week or so ago, and it was still open. my personal PayPal account. So I was like, you know what? Screw it. There's nothing in there. I have everything deleted out of there. All of my contacts are deleted. All of my bank information is deleted. It's got my name. It's got my address, because it wouldn't let me delete my address. There's nothing they can't take any money from me out of the PayPal account. So I was like, well, let me see if Bandcamp offers another payment service. because that was primarily who they used. And so I emailed them and asked them, I said, do y'all have another payment service that I can use to get payouts from you guys for sales on Bandcamp? And they eventually emailed me back and said, no, we haven't partnered with any other payout service. We only use PayPal. And I was like, well, I guess this is the end of our business relationship, because I do not want anything to do with PayPal, especially after the whole debacle that I had with them. So I deleted all of my stuff off of Bandcamp, and I made sure I had because some of the songs I had stored on Bandcamp that I didn't have them saved anywhere else. So I re-downloaded the ones that Bandcamp had and made sure I had good copies of them. And then I deleted everything off of Bandcamp, and I went to close my PayPal account, and guess what? Just like that, done. 5 seconds.
Oh, it worked?
It
oh,
worked.
okay. Wow. Okay.
But it was for my Bandcamp, because I had my business one, which was Phytophiliac, and then I had my personal one. My personal one is still open, but they closed my professional one. They had no problem closing that one. None whatsoever.
Yeah.
So
being in the business that I'm in, as far as doing a show, I'm doing a show. I don't want PayPal to watch my show and say that I owe them $3,000 because what I say doesn't agree with what the World Economic Forum thinks is a fact. So I had to cut mine off too, but mine took only 2 days, and that was on my end. I was going through and taking myself off of a bunch of things that I was subscribed to, but it was cool because now I'm making sure that a lot of the people that I was subscribed to, as far as having subscriptions to shows and stuff like that, I'm making sure that I'm giving them the best payment person, because, you know, for instance, like Media Monarchy actually prefers Patreon because he has the grandfather deal. So I went through them. I'm not big on Patreon, but I'm happy that James is getting more and not getting the processing fees that PayPal was giving him, because he said that PayPal was one of the worst.
Oh yeah, that was the other thing too, you know, because Bandcamp, they take, depending on the price of the album that you have posted, if it's less than $10, they take 10%. If it's more than $10, they take 15%. And then PayPal takes, I think, like 1.9 or 2% out of whatever money you get from Bandcamp. So if I charge like $12 for an album, I'm losing like 16% to fees for money processing. And so I'm not actually getting the full amount. And Bandcamp's like, oh, well, we give 82% of all music sales directly back to the artist. It's like, that's not entirely accurate, because you only use PayPal, and PayPal charges a fee too to use that money, or to use that service. So you're really not being completely honest there about what the artist is getting. Now, I will say they do give the most, as far as Bandcamp goes, they actually take the least amount. They charge the least amount for music hosting and all that stuff. And they do provide an invaluable service to people. And I really hated taking my music off of Bandcamp, because it really was a good place to make music. But I'm solid in my conviction about PayPal, because I actually called my bank and asked them about, because they wouldn't close, because PayPal wouldn't close my personal account, and it was linked to my personal bank account. And so I called my bank and I asked them if there was any way that PayPal could take money out of my account, my bank account, if I removed my bank account information from PayPal, because they actually, you can remove it, but they still hold on to that information. They still have a copy of it. It doesn't delete, it just removes it from like ready access. And she said, no, if you've deleted your bank information from PayPal, they cannot just take money out of your account. And I said, well, that makes me feel better, because they won't close my PayPal account. And I said, how many calls a day do you get with people having problems with PayPal? She said, every single day, about half of their day is taken up with phone calls from customers with problems with PayPal because of fraud. And if that doesn't scare you about PayPal and make you want to leave PayPal in the dust, I honestly don't know what will, because PayPal, and if you think about it, PayPal is the primary money changer for eBay. And if you go on eBay and you look anything up, the top probably 25, 30 search results for whatever you're getting comes from China. And there's so much fraud that goes on with eBay. I've even looked up for stuff on eBay to buy that I needed for my house or whatever, and it was really, really inexpensive. And then you look at where it's coming from, and it's coming from China. It's coming from Hong Kong. It's coming from Shanghai. Not Shanghai. It's coming from those towns from around Hong Kong. And so, there's a lot of, I don't even know that PayPal even has employees. I don't think they actually have employees. I think the entire thing is run by an AI robot. I really genuinely do, because when I called to talk to customer service, it was like pulling teeth to get an actual person on the phone. It was insane. I don't think there's actual human beings working at PayPal in their headquarters. I think they might have maybe 10 people.
So I had just got a new card. It wasn't that long ago, a couple months back, and I used it maybe 3 times, and then somebody had used my card fraudulently right after that, and I hadn't given it to anything. And so whenever I called the bank, I asked them if fraud is up, and they said that fraud is way up. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And I think that this is playing into an agenda of getting us on the CBDCs. Biometrics.
I think they're trying to nuke PayPal and other services like PayPal. I did sign up for Gab Pay. It's through the Gab website. It's basically the Twitter alternative.
Right, Torba.
Yeah, I signed up through Gab Pay so people could send me money through them. And then I'm also signed up with Stripe, but that's kind of more of a subscription more than it is like a one-time purchase option. But really the options for digital payment services are really limited, even with all this technology that we have. So, I honestly would just as soon prefer somebody to send me a money order or a check. If they have that capability. I don't want anybody sending me cash through the mail, just because it could get lost. And at least with the money order, it's somebody couldn't just get it. And then there's a set kind of a safety mechanism with money orders and checks that cash doesn't have, unless I'm like in face to face, person to person with an individual. But as far as people that are like far away, that's my preferred method. And I really don't want to have to rely on these digital payment services, but we're getting to the point where they're engineering society to the point where you have to have some kind of digital payment service to do any kind of business transactions online. It's ridiculous. They're definitely trying to phase out cash as much as humanly possible.
Yep. Oh yeah. I should recommend this to listeners. Catherine Austin Fitz always talks about doing Cash Fridays, where everything that you buy on Fridays is cash, and you can make it more days than Fridays, obviously, but get some cash out, use cash, and
even one day a week is something.
Yeah, make people happy, give them cash. We don't want cash to go away. Once cash goes away, they know everything that you're doing. Mm-hmm. If you can watch what people are spending, then you can really track and trace their life. Let's see. Well, we've got some more news stories that we haven't gotten to. So the World Economic Forum, all these guys are showing up in their private jets, and these guys want unvaccinated pilots for their private jets. I think that's pretty interesting, considering that they were the ones that were pushing all this stuff. But they seem to think that a pilot that hasn't injected themselves with mRNA is going to be a better pilot for them.
Kind of like how they think a gas car in freezing temperatures is way better than an electric vehicle. Isn't that interesting? No, I didn't. I actually didn't hear about that. I thought you were going to go a different direction with the pilots, but yeah, that's. I mean, they've and even and even Bill Gates is coming out now and talking about how we need to get away from like the injectable vaccines, and he's wanting to promote the inhaled nasal spray vaccine like they did for the H1N1, and they have like the flu mist. He's wanting to do those more than he's wanting to do the injectables now, and it's kind of he's kind of like quietly trying to insert that into the consciousness of the public, just kind of like ease it in there, like like he wasn't just pushing vaccines like hardcore 2 years ago and a year ago and saying, oh, we all need to get injected, get our boosters. And he's trying to change the whole paradigm. He's working on that, and I'm like, why are we listening to this guy? Seriously, why are we listening to him?
I saw a thing where they're talking about using mRNA to fix people's heart problems that they got from taking the mRNA. You know what? If that were true, they wouldn't be looking for unvaccinated pilots. They would just inject them with their new mRNA concoction and fix them up right fast. But it doesn't fix you up right fast. Don't do it again.
You just said something that kind of reminded me of something that I had thought about the other day. And I was going to write it down, and I never did, but I'm glad I remembered, because I almost never remember stuff. So when they first started talking about the mRNA vaccines, the thing that people were kind of all up in arms about wasn't that it was this new technology. It was that they were using mRNA. To me, it's two different mRNAs. There's modified RNA and there's messenger RNA. And so when they were talking about mRNA vaccines, and they were talking about modified RNA vaccines, it's not the same thing. They're two completely different things. Messenger RNA is what tells the body to replicate. It's the recipe, if you will, when it comes to cell replication. The tRNA is what is in the cell, and then the mRNA copies the tRNA, and then the mRNA goes out of the cell into another cell, and that's how cells are replicated. So what they've been injecting people with is modified RNA, and that's what's been making the spike proteins in people, and it's making the bodies produce the spike protein. It's not telling the cells what to do. It's, as far as replicating the cell, it's telling the cells to produce something. It's not quite the same thing. And I know that Ryan Christian has talked about this before on one of his shows. He talked about the difference between modified RNA and messenger RNA. And I think people have forgotten that whole conversation. And so now they're wanting to do modified RNA for everything. And I actually had talked to an old high school classmate. Actually, she was a couple of years behind me, but I happened to run into her while she was visiting her mom not too long ago, maybe a year or so ago. And we were talking about the vaccines, how they had just come out with the vaccines and everything. And she said she was really excited. She was like over the moon excited. She's like, this is crazy, because all of this is going on. And this is what I wrote my thesis on for my bachelor's degree. And I was like, you did what? She said, yeah, I wrote my thesis on modified RNA. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. She said, yeah, the way they're portraying it in the news, it's not at all what it really is. And we didn't really go into too deep of a conversation about it because our time was limited. But she's like one of the only people that I've ever met that actually knew what mRNA was, the modified RNA was. And she's like, yeah, she's the potential for the applications of modified RNA they're almost limitless as far as benefits to humanity. But she's like, there's still a long ways to go with it. She said, but it's really fascinating. And I was like, I really wished I had time to talk to her about it, because she really seemed to know what she was talking about. But I think about it all the time when, people are like, oh, vaccines are blah, blah, blah. And people need to get their shots and everything. It's like, you don't even know what's in that thing that you're taking, that you're telling other people to take. You don't even know how it works. You don't know what it is. You don't know where it came from. And we're supposed to just blindly trust that this thing is safe for us because the people that made it say it is. And the people that made it are also the people that made and approved a medication called Aduhelm, which has a $56,000 a year price tag, has no benefit to the patient for dementia, no benefit, has significant adverse side effects, and it costs $56,000 a year. And it's like, and this was approved by the FDA. The same people that approved these shots. Really? I mean, yep. It's completely bonkers how people are just so blindly trusting these institutions just because they have these people with so many letters behind their name. And it's like,
you make me think of
blows my mind.
Language. So that's a thing that's going on here, and it's subtle, but like you were saying before, that the M stood for we always thought it was messenger, but it's modified, mm-hmm. And so whenever we start talking, we sound like we don't know what we're talking about because we're sitting here repeating something that
different things, yeah,
that we heard from one of our shows, and we're sitting here and we keep saying messenger, but we mean modified or something like that. But then the other thing with language is the way that the language around vaccine has been altered throughout this, and just the way that it's spoken of in society is that a vaccine is gonna prevent or fix things up, regardless. Just the way we use it in language anyway, and so that's really interesting. So an abusive language has definitely helped them along with all of this, and I think they talked about that at the World Economic Forum as well.
I'm sure they did. There was quite a bit that I missed as far as the interviews and the speeches and the presentations and stuff. There was quite a bit because I kept trying to find video because I wanted to watch a lot of the presentations and the speakers as they did their stuff, and because I really wanted to see what they were talking about, but either time got away from me or I couldn't find what I was looking for. And so I was only able to catch what has been pushed out, like on Twitter and on the news and stuff. Well, actually not on the news because the news isn't talking about it, but like on like just basic web searches and stuff for World Economic Forum. So, but yeah, and I think I noticed maybe 5 or 6 years ago that they were changing the meaning of words. And I don't know, it's kind of like one of those things where if you're not looking for it, you don't see it. But if you're looking for it, it's everywhere. And I think about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I had actually watched a presentation that James Corbett did called Words as Weapons. And of course he was before his time, he's 20 minutes into the future. And he was back in 2005 or 6, I think he was talking about the media using words as weapons and changing the meaning of words so that people think they know what the media is talking about, but they're not talking about the same thing that what people understand the words to mean. It's on his website. I think it might even still be on YouTube, but it's his presentation called Words as Weapon. I think Weapons, he did it as a TED Talk. And it was really, really good. And it really opened my eyes to a lot of the shenanigans that the media engages in when they're presenting information to people on their so-called newscasts. And watch what he has to say and listen to what he has to say when he talks about the propaganda that they use, and then try to watch a news story about stuff and you're like, oh, I think they meant something else when they when Jet played, he talked about the FBI had lost $600 million. And I was like, I think they mean laundered. The FBI doesn't just lose money, okay?
Right.
They don't lose track of it. They know exactly where it is. They laundered that money, okay? So it's like,
here's a good one. Mostly peaceful. There's mostly peaceful things happening in Atlanta right now because a non-binary person shot a state trooper. I believe it was a state trooper. It might have been something else, but they were taken out after that, obviously, because you can't really just go around doing that. And now there's riots in Atlanta.
Right. So here's my take on this, and it goes right in hand with the whole document saga that Biden is going through, and the whole Damar Hamlin saga that he's going through. What they're telling us on the news when it comes to stories like that, even Twitter files, I have no physical proof that anything that they're saying is true. Now, especially with Biden, like the documents that they're supposedly finding in his house in unsecured locations. They're telling us that they found these documents. Who found the documents? Nobody knows. Where were the documents? Oh, they were just sitting on a shelf in his house, or they were in a folder in his garage. And it's like, how many people have access to his house? Why would he have just random documents just laying around his house? And why is it taking so long? These were documents apparently from when he was president. Why would he have them just laying in his house and they're just now finding them? 10 years later? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And
yeah, this is orchestrated.
What they're saying, and it may be true. It may be, but I have no way of knowing that any of that is entirely. Yeah, they're talking about it on the news, but
I think
it'll be a completely made up story because I have no physical proof in front of me except what they're telling me, and they are known liars on numerous occasions. So what in that entire story, in any of those stories, tells me that what I'm seeing and what's being told is true? So like with Damar Hamlin, they're saying, oh, he's back, and he's hanging out at the football stadium while they're doing games or practicing, whatever. You never see his face. You never hear him speak. You don't see him. I mean, for all I know, that's I don't know that guy from Adam, and it's like there's no proof. And even this morning on Media Monarchy, we're like, well, he's tweeting. It's like, yeah, and anybody could log into a Twitter account and start posting. That doesn't mean it's coming from him. So it's really bizarre how people just automatically trust that the story that's being told on the news is 100% true. It's like, they've lied about everything up to now. Why would you believe them? It doesn't make any sense. So the whole thing with the riots that are going on in Atlanta, I guess, I think it's just another fear campaign. And hell, it could have been CIA agents that threw those rocks into those buildings for all I know.
Well, yeah, apparently they're all from other states.
Yeah, they're all kids. Somebody paid them to go do all of that. And that's not any different than what happened in Ferguson and all those other places. And, and when they were having, where it was, where they were coming across, I don't know if it was Chicago, wherever it was, there was some riots going on and people were coming across these pallets of bricks just sitting there. Somebody had dropped off in the middle of the city. It's like, there's no construction zones around here. And you're just coming across this big pile of bricks. And it's like, you got this big honeypot just sitting right there in the middle of downtown for no apparent reason. And it's like, what are they even there for? And I don't understand how people can just watch the news and just think that they're being informed about anything. You know,
Right.
I just, it's all of his lies. I can't even watch it. And our TV broke, and our TV went out and stopped working last week, and I have never been happier. My husband wants to get a new one. I was like, well, then you go buy a TV, because I'm not buying a TV. I'm not doing it. I'm not. If you can find one that works for free, maybe we'll get another one. But I'm not spending any more money on another TV. Just not going to do it. It has been, my nerves have been calmer not having a TV in the living room anymore, or not having a working TV. I've been calmer. Everything's been quieter. I just feel better not having that in my house. It's just.
Oh, I get it.
I mean, everything I need to know, I can look it up. I can just look it up. It's not a problem.
They put me in hotels all the time because I'm between trucks sometimes. And when I'm between trucks, I never turn on the TV in this places. One time I turned on the TV, and it was to watch a World Series game because the Astros were in it. And I just was like, oh, the World Series is on. I might as well see this one game.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was it. That's the only time I've turned on the TV in about 2 years of doing the job that puts me in hotels all the time. And we had one more story that I want to cover before we give our farewells. The nursing strike that happened in New York recently. I know that you followed that closely, so tell us what you know.
All right. So I had actually heard about the nursing strikes, the potential for strikes, back at the beginning of December. I subscribe to Medscape. They do newsletters and stuff. They do several different kinds of newsletters that comes into my email. And every once in a while, I'll catch a story from them that is medical related that kind of piques my interest, and I'll follow it. And then I'll go read the comments. The comments are always a treat. Because you have these well-meaning physicians and practitioners. They're kind. You can tell by their responses they're kind, thoughtful individuals, and they're arguing with each other, but it's in such a nice way. It's like, I wish I could put that on Twitter and just have that kind of interaction with people on Twitter, because it's like they're calling each other out, but they're doing it in such a nice way. It's like, oh, this is so refreshing. But they did an article about the nurse strikes, and it was funny because they were talking about the nurse shortage. And so I was like, is it really a nurse shortage, or is it a staffing shortage? Because those are two completely different things. And so
right.
I looked up the numbers. I went online and I did a search. How many active nursing licenses are there in the United States? And I came across this article where they were talking about how the supply, or the number of active nursing licenses, has actually increased every year. Year over year, we're having more and more active nursing licenses. And that's LVNs and RNs mostly. They're not really talking about like advanced practice nurses or PhDs. They're talking about nurses that work in hospitals and stuff. And they're mostly talking about registered nurses, RNs, which are bachelor's degrees. And they're saying that every year, because I remember when I was in nursing school back in 2007, they were telling us, they're like, okay, so their nurses, the nursing licensure numbers had actually been declining, and that there was actually going to be a shortage of nurses by the year 2020. That was going to be a dangerous nursing shortage. And so they talked about that when I was in 2007. So they kind of knew it was coming. And so they've been trying to like bump up the numbers and get more nurses through nursing school and all that stuff. So as the years go on, the efforts are paying off, and more nurses are graduating and passing their board exams and getting licensed. So the numbers have increased steadily year after year. We have tons of nurses. We have probably enough to almost more than enough. We probably have enough nurses now licensed in the United States to staff all the hospitals adequately. The problem is the nurses are now starting to leave the profession. And it's not that we don't have nurses, it's they're not wanting to work for many reasons. You're seeing that across all industries, actually, people not wanting to work, not wanting to do the work that is required of them for various reasons. I don't know if it's like a generational thing, the laziness. I don't know if it's the entitlement. I don't know exactly, but I know that a lot of nurses, especially in the last 3 years, have been completely burnt out. So like at the beginning of, so I've been in my job, doing my job, working with nursing home residents for a doctor's office since 2016. And in 2020, when all of this COVID stuff kicked off, the nurse practitioner that I work with, she and I were talking about it, and we're like, okay, so we know that it's once it hit New York, we knew that it was eventually going to come to Texas. We knew it was coming. You can't stop a virus. You can only treat it. And that's all it has ever been. You cannot stop people from catching a virus. If you believe that viruses actually exist anyway, but that's a story for another day. So strictly speaking, in that aspect, you can't stop a virus. You can only treat it, and you can only manage the symptoms. And that's really all you can do. Now you can vaccinate to prevent, like with chicken pox, you can vaccinate for chicken pox, and even that doesn't guarantee you won't catch it, but it will lower the significance of the infection. So like you won't have as bad of an infection. And even with, and I think a lot of the vaccines now are maybe not so much necessary, as long as you've got good health, good diet, a good nutritional diet. You live in a clean environment, not a sanitized environment, but a generally just clean, hygienic environment. A lot of these illnesses that we vaccinate for will run their course, and you'll be just fine as long as you're healthy. But if you're not healthy, then, you know, other things you may need to be taking into consideration. So we knew that the COVID was coming, the virus, or what they were calling was the virus. We knew it was going to come and impact our area. We didn't know how bad it was going to get. And so at the beginning of 2021, one of the nursing homes that we go to, I knew they were going to need some staff. And so I volunteered. Oh, well, not volunteered. They hired me on part-time, and I would work in the evenings after I got off work. And then I would do like some weekend shifts. And so I was working a full-time 8 to 5, Monday through Friday job. And then in the evenings, I would work 4 or 5 hours. And then on the weekends, I would work, you know, a shift, a 12-hour shift. So I was working constantly. And especially when the worst of it hit us. And it didn't take very long. I think about 7 months into it. I started in January, and then probably by the end of the summer, I was like, I'm done with this. I don't think I can do this anymore. So I ended up working like to the end of the year, and I forced myself through. And then I was like, I need to keep pushing because they need the help. These patients, these patients need help, and there's nobody else to help them. They don't have enough staff. And so I was like, it was because of the patients that I kept working. And then the lockdowns came. They had locked down the buildings to where only essential employees like medical professionals and vendors like x-ray technicians, lab technicians were allowed in, no family members, no visitors. And so that in beginning of 2022, I was really starting to feel the burden of working 2 jobs in the middle of all of this, these crazy restrictions and just these mandates and everything. And it was really weighing on me, especially when they were starting to talk about the vaccination, the COVID shots, and requiring employees to take the COVID shots. And I was like, I don't want to take the COVID shot. I don't think I should have to take the COVID shot. We have all the PPE. I mean, granted, it was kind of spread thin, but they had it, and they were using it to the best that they could. And I was like, I don't think it's the right thing for me to take this COVID shot. And so a lot of places were like, well, you have to get the COVID shot or you're going to lose your job. I was like, well, then you're just going to have to fire me because I'm not going to take the shot. And then there's like, oh, well, we'll take a religious exemption. And I was like, And that's when I started to see that there was cracks in their logic, and that this wasn't about health. This wasn't about protecting people. I mean, even before that I knew, but it's like I'm getting it's reiterated to me. And so I decided in January of 2021 that I wasn't going to do this anymore. I said, I'm not going to work part-time anymore because I can't deal with all of this. And so I quit the part-time job. I still kept doing my full-time job. And I told them when I quit the part-time job, they had the facility on lockdown. I mean, the inside of the facility was locked down. They had the residents on lockdown, not just no visitors. They were in their rooms locked down. They weren't able to move freely in the building. And I'm like, and I didn't understand why, because the whole building either had symptoms or they were positive. And a lot of the people that were positive didn't have symptoms, but they were all positive. And I'm like, they're not sick. Why are you locking them in their room or keeping them in their rooms? And we started seeing people lose weight. We started seeing patients becoming depressed. We started seeing patients withdraw. And a lot of them did pass away because they couldn't leave their rooms. We had three individuals in particular that I was concerned about. One of them was a man who was ambulatory. He was able to walk around. He could dress himself. He could feed himself. He would walk around the building all day long, and he would go from one end of the building to the other, hang out over here for a little bit. He'd get up, move, and go walk over here for a little bit and hang out. And he loved that freedom that he had to just walk around and just be able to do whatever he wanted to do. And when they told them all to stay in their room, he laid in that bed and he never got back up out of that bed. And he died in that bed. He willed himself to death because he could not leave his room. And that pissed me off more than anything, I think, and really, really stuck with me. And I said, I'm not doing this anymore. You guys are not doing this for the sake of the residents. You're doing this so that the government doesn't come down on you. And it's like, that's not the way you take care of people. You're not doing right by these patients. And so I left.
It wasn't just because they won't come down on it. They weren't worried about the government coming down on them. They were worried about getting the free money from the government. The government was bribing all these people.
Well, and that's what I mean. I mean, the like CMS and Medicare and Medicaid, they were afraid of losing that money that they were getting for these for taking care of these patients. Not even just the COVID money, just the federal funding that they were getting. And so I told them that, I said, take me off of your part-time call list. Do not call me for these part-time positions anymore. I'm not going to do this anymore. And so I told them, I said, okay, so that being said, I said, you need to keep an eye on these other 2 residents that are bedbound patients anyway. I said, you need to keep an eye on them because they're losing weight. They're not doing well. They're not going to do very well if y'all don't start doing something with these residents. And it wasn't 2 weeks later, both of them passed away. And I knew, having watched all of this happen, that none of this was about health. None of this was about keeping people safe. None of this was about doing right by taking care of patients. It was all about control and people doing what they're told for the sake of doing what you're told, not because it's beneficial in any way, shape, or form. So a lot of nurses either didn't come back to work or they went to other fields. They still kept their licenses, which is weird because I had actually read somewhere that there were like hundreds of thousands of active nursing licenses that were not tied to a full-time job or a part-time job even. Because when a nurse applies for a job, that employer registers that licensure with the state. So the state knows how many licensed nurses are currently working. And so they had like over 100,000 nursing licenses that were not associated with a full-time job. So where were they? You know, they were at home. They were picking up different other jobs. They were doing other things. They weren't working as nurses. They were working in some other fashion. So it's not that we don't have the nurses. It's not a nursing shortage. There's plenty of nurses. They just don't want to work in these terrible working conditions, you know, because like what was going on in New York, especially like in the height of all of this craziness, they were being forced to work, and these if their shift didn't, if their relief didn't come in, they had to stay and work. And then, you know, they were being told they had to have. Working in a hospital, working in a nursing home is a little bit different. Nursing home, you have mostly stable residents. Mostly. There's very few that are actually needing like one-on-one care. So you can manage far more nursing home residents at one time than you can what's called acute care. And that's what the hospital is, acute care. It's short-term, intense, well, yeah, more observant, more closely monitored. You can only do like really close monitoring of so many patients before you start losing a quality to your work. And most nurses would agree that a ratio of 1 nurse to 5 patients is plenty. That's probably the max that a nurse can give quality care to these patients. 5 patients, and they're acute. They have issues going on, and each of them are different, or some of them are the same, whatever. But they require really close monitoring, like in the hospital. They have fluids to give. They have IV medications to give. They have oral medications. They have documentation to do. They have to help them with their like getting up, going to the bathroom, or going, you know, somewhere in their room, getting dressed, you know, doing things, hands-on things with these patients. 5 people, that's a lot, especially if you have some really critical patients. The nurses in New York, they were being tasked with taking care of 20 patients, acute patients. That's way too many. And I can't imagine going into a shift where I was responsible for 20 acute patients. There's a thing that nurses can do. It's called safe harbor, and it takes about an hour to set up, but it's something that if you're facing a situation where you have responsible for 20 patients, the likelihood that something will go wrong and a patient will suffer serious consequences is really high if you have 20 of them. And if you enact safe harbor, and you have to do it when you first get there, this is going to protect you from help protect you from a severe penalty if you have a patient that died on you because you were down the hall with another patient and you couldn't get to this other patient because you can't be in 2 places at once. So it's a method of protecting. If I had 20 patients to take care of every single day, I'd be enacting safe harbor every single day until things got better. But that's what these nurses were facing in New York. They were being forced to take care of 20 patients at a time. I can't even imagine having to document on 20 patients in a 12-hour shift. That's insane. Acute patients. Now, nursing home patients is different, but with like in a hospital, that's crazy. That's absolute insanity. And then on top of that, you're not giving them a cost of living raise. You're not increasing any of their benefits for taking on extra work, doing the work of 4 people, and you're still getting paid the amount one person would get paid. That's not equitable. And so that's what these nurses were fighting for. They were wanting, and the hospitals refused to increase staff. It's not that they didn't have nurses available, that there weren't nurses available to hire. It's just nobody wants to work when they have to come take care of 20 patients. The hospitals wouldn't hire more staff. They wouldn't increase the pay. They were hiring on these staffing agency nurses. Now, I have absolutely nothing but respect for staffing agency nurses. And I don't mean this in any way to denigrate the work that staffing agency nurses do, because they fill a very real need. They come in when a hospital or a facility is short-staffed, and they fill a position, and they are basically they're on their toes because they don't necessarily know the ins and outs every day of. Granted, most healthcare facilities, they're all pretty much the same, especially with hospitals. Most of them are basically the same, but there's like little things that are different between each of these hospitals. And learning how to go with the flow and think quickly on your feet. That's what staffing agency nurses do, or they're supposed to. A lot of them, we had problems with staffing nurses when I was taking care of, when we were doing the nursing home residents, because we'd get them from the hospital. They'd be discharged from the hospital by a staffing agency nurse, and the medications were not verified. So we had no idea what medications the patient was supposed to even be on when they got to the nursing home. They didn't have proper documentation half the time. We had one guy come from a hospital in Beaumont, and he was admitted to the nursing home, and he had this giant wound on his backside. I mean, huge, took up the entire area of his backside, like below, like his where his tailbone is. The dressing that was on the bandage that was covering his wound was a week old. And it's a wonder the guy didn't have an infection, to be completely honest with you. They had not changed his dressing in a week, and they're supposed to be changed every day. It was absolutely horrific. And this was what was coming from the hospital.
This makes a lot of this stuff make more sense, because you wonder how they dealt with all this stuff, like whenever they were being told to shove breathing tubes down people and went along with it, or whenever they were told to inject them with remdesivir, or however you give somebody remdesivir. But it seems like what happened was they just slammed them with a whole bunch of stuff, shorted their staff so that they could look like they were at capacity, because that's what got the hospital paid the most by the government, and then just continued to perpetuate this thing and rack up the death toll that they could run on the news and scare more people into going to the hospital.
And these, and I'm not saying that I probably wouldn't have missed some things myself if had I been in that situation, had I been working at the hospital. I'm not saying I'm perfect and that I would have done everything that I was supposed to do and got it all done, in the medical field. And that's part of the problem. We tolerate working shorthanded, and we tolerate this low quality of care that the amount of time we have to give is all that we can give. But we're not allowed to give a higher level of care because time doesn't allow it. And so I'm not saying things couldn't have been, I'm not saying things should have been perfect, but I mean, my God, I can't even imagine discharging a patient from the hospital and them having a dressing that hadn't been changed in a week. Even it boggles my mind. That should have been like one of the main things that got looked at prior to him leaving the hospital. And then going back through the documentation, it was like 2 weeks worth. He had been in the hospital for like almost a month. And the last 2 weeks of his stay there, hardly anything was documented at all. I mean, there was no mention of a wound on his backside. There was no mention of dressing changes. There was no mention of IV changes, because the IVs have to be changed out every 3 days. There was no mention of any of that stuff. It's like it just stopped at 2 weeks prior to his discharge, and then it picked up again like the day before. And they're like, okay, here you go. It's like, that's not how you take care of a patient.
Yep.
And then when we would call the hospital, the nurse practitioner did it. At first, she had me doing it because she didn't want to have to deal with the hospital. She would have me call and ask them questions about why they're discharging these patients like this. I couldn't get any answers out of anybody. And so I'm like, you're going to have to call because you're a nurse practitioner. It's going to carry more weight if it comes from you. So she would call. They would give her the runaround like nobody's business. They wouldn't answer her questions. They would transfer her to phone numbers that nobody would answer. It would go straight to voicemail. We couldn't get any answers out of them. And then the hospital would turn right around when a patient got sent to the hospital. That hospital called the state and told them that the nursing home patient had a wound on their butt. And I'm like, you guys just sent us this train wreck of a patient, but you're going to call the nursing home. And even the state attorney general came to the nursing home to investigate. The office of the attorney general came to our nursing home here in this town and investigated at the nursing home the claim that hospital made against that nursing home. Absolute insanity. I can't, it really boggles my mind. Just the lack of care that these hospitals have for these patients. I cannot stress it enough. If you at all have the ability to avoid going to the hospital, I strongly suggest you avoid going to the hospital if you can. If you don't feel like you can, make sure you have somebody to go with you, because these hospitals are not advocating for these patients. They're not. And make sure you have somebody legally who has a legal backing to be your advocate, so they can't be kicked out of your room. They can't be kicked out of the hospital. They have to be present. They have to be included in the plan of care. And I cannot stress that enough, especially in this climate, in this, the way the medical field is just deteriorating. And it seems like this whole COVID thing was engineered to completely demolish the healthcare system. And there's no other way to put it. I don't think it's a conspiracy at all. I think it was planned this way from the beginning. And part of it had a lot of aspects to it. Part of it was to demolish the healthcare system. And I think another huge part of it was to get rid of a lot of the elder population. Our numbers have not really recovered. Even 2 years after this has all kicked off and the worst of it hit us, we haven't recovered our numbers. I would like to see the data on how many people we had, how many citizens, people in either just across the country that were age 70 to 100. How many of those people are still alive today? How many people in that 30-year age gap, how many of those people are still alive today compared to 3 years ago? I guarantee you that number is approximately 1/3. I would think we have 1/3 left.
They went for the elderly, and they also went for the obese. So
the unhealthy, the elderly and the infirm, the ones that had a lot of health problems, the people that utilize the health system the most, the elderly and the sick. I think this part of it was to get rid of a significant portion of that population of people. I genuinely do, just based off of everything that I've seen. And it's really heartbreaking because there's so many people that would not survive without the healthcare system, even as bad as it is, even as bad as all of the quality of care, the lack of concern that we see almost on a daily basis. Even with all of that, there are people that would not survive to tomorrow without the healthcare system, without medication, without being able to get to their doctor. And that's really sad. I really wish that people would do more to take care of themselves and be more responsible for their own health. And that's one of the things that I'm going to be doing from going forward, is encouraging people to stop eating the garbage, get up and move around, do something for other people, and realign your perspectives, because the healthcare system is not here to save you. That's not what it's for. And we shouldn't be treating it like it's something that's going to help us. And I hate saying that, because I got into this to help people. I got into being a nurse so that I could help people and do what I could. And I've gotten to the point where there's nothing that I can do anymore except encourage people to take care of themselves and try to reduce their reliance on the healthcare system, because it's financially not feasible. It's not efficient anymore. And even with the care that people are getting, it's not quality. We have patients we had a guy just recently got discharged from the hospital, and his cardiologist had him on all these steroids. And then the urologist, the guy that manages his kidneys and his bladder, had him on these other medications. Well, the medications from each of these physicians were interacting with each other and causing him to be really low blood pressure and causing him to pass out and fall all the time. And if we'd have sent him back to the specialist, they would have put him back on all his medicines, and he would be right back where he was when he went into the hospital. And it's like, y'all aren't even talking to each other about what he actually needs to be on. Your cardiology is just treating the heart. The urologist is treating the kidneys, and never the two ever met to talk about the whole patient and what he actually needs. It's infuriating, because we're sitting here in the middle of it trying to make sure these people are taken care of, and nobody cares. That's something we tell each other all the time. It's like, she'll ask me, the nurse practitioner will ask me, why is the patient on this one? I was like, nobody cares. They don't even look at it. They don't care. Nobody cares. And they don't. It really feels that way. I know there are professionals out there that do care, but it seems like we are vastly outnumbered these days. So that was a really long roundabout way of explaining the whole nursing shortage thing, the staffing shortage. So it's the nurses up in New York. They were overworked, underpaid, underappreciated, and they were wanting the hospitals to make a change. So then, after about 3 days, initially the nursing union that is up there, they have 17,000 registered nurses that are registered with the union, and 14,000 of the nurses out of 17,000 voted yes to strike. And so, according to the contract that the union has with the hospitals, they have to give a 10-day notice if they're going to strike. So they all voted yes, and they said, okay, we're going to strike, and it's going to be starting January 11th, which I think it actually started a couple of days earlier. But they went on strike, and from what I hear, it was like maybe 7,000, 8,000 nurses. It wasn't all 14,000 went on strike, and it took them 3 days of striking to reach an agreement. And the nurses ended up with a 19% pay raise, which I think they could have got more if they'd have stuck to their guns. I think they could have got a 20% at least. And they got their benefits increased, and the hospitals agreed to hire more staff. And I was reading, I was like, that's really great. I'm glad that they got a pay raise, because, even with the cost of living going up and everything going up, they needed that anyway. And with them doing the work of multiple nurses, one nurse doing the work of multiple nurses, they deserve to be paid more. But then I got to thinking, I was like, the hospitals don't care about these nurses. They really don't. I know they reached an agreement, and it benefited the nurses. But if the hospitals genuinely cared, it wouldn't have taken a strike of 7,000 nurses for them to do right by these nurses. I was looking at the all these hospital systems, like up in New York, and even like one down here in Beaumont, Texas. They're nonprofit organizations, and so that means their tax filings are available to the public, and you can look them up. There's a website. I'll have to send you the link. It's called the Paddock Post. And that's what they do. They go through all of these nonprofit organizations, all of them, not just the hospitals, but all these nonprofit 501c3 organizations, and they post, and they post the tax filings, and then they do kind of like a breakdown and they kind of explain where all this money's going and who it's going to, and who these CEOs are, the board of directors, the stakeholders, and who are getting money from, and it shows the highest paid people at these organizations.
Do you want to do like a big like expose kind of thing on this on the Doom Kitchen in a couple weeks?
Sure. I mean, we could. I could go through it. It's actually quite a fascinating read. It's really interesting how these CEOs, these CFOs, these people that are in charge of these hospitals, they're making money hand over fist. I'm talking millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. And for the one down in Beaumont, they in 2020, the top earner was the CEO. He got paid, I think it was $8 million. And then in 2021, he got paid $13 million. Do you think any of those nurses down in Beaumont got a pay raise? Any of them?
Probably not.
Probably
zero.
Not.
Yeah.
And then I was looking up the ones in because when they were talking about the nurses' strike in New York, I looked up some of the hospitals because I went to it was a New York media outlet where they talked about the strike. It was an article on one of the network people up news outlets up there, and they had a little video it was just a video of one of the reporters talking about the nurse strike. And in the video, they listed, there was 8 hospital systems in the video where they listed the names of the hospital systems where the nurses were going to be striking. And so I paused it and I wrote down all the names and I started going down the list of Montefiore and the New York Presbyterian and all them. And I was like, I wonder. So I started looking up tax filings for these hospital systems and looking at how much their CEOs make, how much their board of directors makes, how much their top earners make. It's
let's save it. Let's save it for that show.
Okay.
I want to say hi to a lot of people that were listening. Mud, Soki Doki, Duke Booty, and Maria, who was just on the last show with Aunt Laura, and Sue Lee, who I don't know from our group, but it could be somebody from that group. But Soki Doki had a question about whenever you're advocating for one of your family members that might need to be in a medical situation, what kind of papers and legal things do you need to protect them? And
I did post an entire thread on that on Twitter, but you definitely want a medical power of attorney. If you get nothing else, get a medical power of attorney. You do not have to go through a lawyer to get it. It is a form that is available online for free. And there are even some places that will even walk you through how to fill one of those out. They have to be notarized and signed in order to be a legal document. And you keep the original with you and you make a copy for the hospital to have on file. And they have to keep that in the patient's medical record. And they have to abide by that medical power of attorney. And when the patient goes into the hospital, you tell them, this person is my medical power of attorney. I want them informed of every medical decision before it is acted upon, and let that person be the one to make the decision. And I mean, the patient can too, but if the patient really wants to make sure that like most people don't understand how the medical field works. They don't understand how treatments work. And the hospital, the physicians are required by law to explain every medical procedure, every treatment, every rationale for every treatment, everything that happens to the patient in the hospital. They are legally obligated to explain all of that in a way that the patient can understand and the advocate can understand. So if you have medical power of attorney, that is your legal document, protect you and your patient, that you are informed of everything that goes on, and they are not allowed to do anything to that patient that you do not give express approval of. You have a right to choose your doctor. If you experience a staff member, a nurse or an aide or whoever, a doctor that is, that you do not feel is looking out for your best interest, you have a right to choose a different doctor. You can tell them, I want a different physician. I want a different nurse. You have that right to choose, and they have to abide by that. They cannot force you to engage in, to receive care from someone that you do not want to receive care from. But having that medical power of attorney definitely helps a lot. Regular power of attorney can also have that same leeway, but medical power of attorney has that extra added, medical authority with it. There was a few other things. If you don't have medical power of attorney, you can get something called an advance directive, and that is something that you arrange before you go into the hospital with the person that you're going to be advocating for. So, like with a lot of things, it's better to plan ahead and expect the worst, but hope for the best. You say, somebody, if you know that you have medical problems and you are potentially going to be hospitalized, find somebody that will advocate for you, that you can trust. And it should never be someone that you just met. It should always be somebody who knows you and that trusts you and you trust them. And talk about all of it. Talk about every bit of it, what you would want from start to finish. Even talk about the worst case scenario. If you were to ever become unable to speak for yourself, what would you want done? Do you want to be intubated? Do you want to be resuscitated? Do you want a feeding tube? Do you want, everything. So it's best to talk about this stuff, plan it out, and get it all planned out before going into the hospital, because going in the hospital it's stressful enough as it is, and having all of this stuff ready to go beforehand will save a lot of time and trouble and heartache. So medical power of attorney. That's the short answer.
One of the million reasons why I appreciate you. The other reason is your music. So tell us all about the album again, and let people know where they can get a hold of it and get a hold of you if they want to. And I understand you have some T-shirts out. I've got 2 on the way. I'm very happy about that.
Me too.
And and just give a nice little outro, and by the way, thanks for tuning in, Aberrant, as well. I saw that you popped up in the chat right afterwards. So yeah, we got a nice little team assembled here.
Yeah.
All right, well, go ahead.
All right. So my 8th album, Contumacy, it is one that I had been working on for actually a lot longer than most of my other albums. I think this one actually took a couple of months. I wanted to go back to full techno album. I had kind of started getting away from the techno. I started kind of going down the funky road a little bit. But techno is something that it resonates with me. I love techno. And so, or electronic music. And so I was trying to get back into the full swing of that. And that's what the whole vibe of that album is. The messaging behind this album, I for a long time, I didn't know because normally I'll come up with the title of the album and then I'll build the songs around that. But this one, it just would not come to me. I could not think of a proper title for this album. And so I went ahead and just came up with the names of the songs. And the songs are the titles, they reflect the imagery that I wanted to portray in the music of each song. And so the songs like Artifice and Into the Maze and Out of Time they have a lot to do with the thoughts and principles that you would find in the alternative media community. The idea that, for one, we don't have a lot of time left. We are actually, I think, running out of time, especially with like the World Economic Forum's Agenda 2030. That's just 7 years away. And they already have their plans. They know what they want to do. And they're already having to adjust their plans because people are waking up and people are starting to pay attention and starting to connect dots. And that's kind of the idea, the impetus behind this album. And so when I came up with the title, I wanted to pick a title. I wanted a word that kind of encapsulated the entire media, alternative media, but wasn't like this really long, drawn out, title. I wanted it to be succinct, concise. And so I was looking for, I was kind of on a non-compliance kick. I was like, well, non-compliance is not a really good title for an album. So I was like, okay, so what are some more premises, more thoughts, more feelings around non-compliance? And it's like, well, it's kind of a civil disobedience kind of thing. And it's like, we really don't have enough people saying no. And, we have teenagers and kids that are defiant to authority, and they're kind of like the anarchists that everybody kind of loses. That as you get older, you kind of lose that drive to buck the system. But we need more of that responsible bucking of the system, so to speak. And so I remember there was a quote that I'd heard, and I couldn't remember the exact words, but it came out of the Declaration of Independence. And it was about the duty of the citizen to overthrow a government if that government no longer benefited the people. If that government was no longer serving the people for whom it was created, then that government, that tyrannical government, as citizens of the United States, we have a duty, not just a right, we have a duty, a responsibility, a moral obligation to overthrow that government and put in its place something that will benefit humanity, that will benefit the citizens. And so I kind of went along the whole disobedient track. I looked up synonyms for disobedience, and I came across this word, contumacy. And I was like, I've never heard that word before. So I looked it up, and it was basically the word I was looking for. It's the obstinate defiance of authority. Just no. Just no. And I was like, that's it. That's the word. So nice. That's how I came up with that. And really that whole segment of text from the Declaration of Independence, basically, that's what we need more of. And I hope to get that message across to people with my music. And also, I'm not really great with lyrics, so of course it's another instrumental. So hopefully next time I'll put some lyrics and some vocals in my music. But for now, we're just sticking with instrumental. So, and a special treat, the very last song I wrote entirely while on mushrooms. So pay special attention to that song, because that one's special to me. I've never done them before, so yeah, that was great.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining me. I really appreciate having you on the show. It's always fun.
I'm so glad to see you again, Andy. It's always fun, as always.
We got to meet in real life, and that was
cool
fun.
Too.
Yeah,
that was fun.
Yeah.
We'll have to try again sometime.
Yeah, I hope so.
Lost you there. I can't hear you.
In a world where so much of the music has become audible garbage, there is an artist trying to make all that better. From the artist who gave you Truth Be Told and Chasing Midnight comes the ultimate album, Contumacy by Phytophiliac. 6 months in the making, it will make your feet step in the right direction. On January 2nd, 2023, let this album bring you comfort in knowing that you are not alone in a world dominated by government-funded propaganda, outright lies from those who seek to make you an all-out slave to their greed, corruption, and abuses. Contumacy will be available on major streaming platforms starting January 22nd, 2023.